Thank you. For the last 5 years, I've been interviewing people and companies on my podcast about how they're doing remote working and how they're making it work. Now, one example I really like to give is one of my favorite interviews, is the example of the R-Loop team. Now, in 2015, SpaceX introduced a competition to build a Hyperloop. It's a transportation system, super fast transportation system that can take a commute of 7 hours and squeeze it into 30 minutes. You're basically being shot through a gravity tube with a hyperpod at like super high speeds. Now, I wouldn't want to be the beta tester, but it is a pretty cool form. So now Tom here in the upper left, he wanted to join this competition, and so he went on to Reddit, in a subforum of Reddit, and wrote down, hey, I want to join this competition. Is there anybody out there that is interested in joining me? And 1 year later, with a team of over 400 volunteers from all over the world who had never met each other, they came in finalists in this competition. And they're still working on the Hyperpod to this day. So it just goes to show that, yes, we can be a high-functioning remote team working on complex projects. And I think this one's particularly exciting because they were all volunteers. They weren't even being paid for it. And it is possible to do it. So if they can do it, I think that the rest of us can do it too. But one thing to really understand is that remote is different. And I'm not here to argue, oh, remote is better than in-person, because it totally depends. Each one has its pros and cons. But one of the biggest mistakes that we make is that we try to take the practices that we have in person and we translate those directly online, and they don't translate well. Remote work is a different way of working, and it's a different mindset. And there's no one right way. I wish there were, because I would make $1 million on my silver bullet remote working solution. But the fact of the matter is that there are many right ways, many right ways. And it's really up to each team to decide what is going to work for your team. So today I'm going to give you a whole bunch of different examples, and hopefully a couple of those will be something that you'll want to use on your teams. Now, that being said, and that there are many right ways, I think that there are 3 really main areas of focus where we can start. And that is, 1, we want to make communicating easy with each other. I saw in Juta's presentation this morning, 2 of the biggest challenges that people are facing on their teams in general are communication and collaboration. So that's definitely an area of focus. We want to make communicating easy. We need to define what does normal behavior look like on our team. And we need to create presence with each other. What does going to work mean in the modern virtual workforce? And I want to give you a bunch of examples of that, because that's pretty much where it's exciting. And then the last thing I would add to that is we should try to focus on fun. There's really a magic that happens with teams when there's that team spirit and camaraderie that we have, and we're having fun together. There's sort of something that happens where teams go above and beyond. And so there's also that area of focus. Okay, but let's start with making communicating easy. And what do I mean by that? One of my favorite quotes from the interviews that I did came from Agile Bill Krebs. He's an Agile coach in the United States, and he said, people think that they want to be co-located, but what they really want is high bandwidth communication. We want to be able to talk to our remote colleagues as if they were standing next to us. And I think a great example of this is Star Trek. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so forgive me for this. But on Star Trek, they have these communicators, and let's just see how it works.
J-Mate of the bridge report.
I've got a surprise for you, Captain. Come see.
J-Mate of bridge.
Chakotay here.
J-Mate of bridge report. It's close enough. Bridge, start the decompression sequence.
Right, so we want it to be that easy. Like, hey, Lisette to Bob, let's talk. Instead of, hey, do you have time next Tuesday at 2 o'clock? And we set up a meeting. Oh, your schedule's not good. Back and forth, 10 emails until we finally set up a time. Like, it doesn't need to be that way anymore. We really want it to be pushed to talk. Now, the way that we do that is, first, you have to start with a really good internet connection. And I know it seems obvious, and actually here in the Nordics, it's not such a big problem. Internet seems to be awesome here wherever you go, but I'm sure you have colleagues in other parts of the world where their internet connection is not awesome, and it really gets in the way of good communication. So internet is sort of the baseline function that we need in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You've all probably seen inner Wi-Fi is the base hierarchy of need. Well, in remote teams, it really is the base hierarchy of needs. So focusing on good internet connections. And in fact, I should say there's a company that I interviewed in Australia and called Envato, and their company was founded by digital nomads, and so they encourage their employees to travel for 3 months of the year. However, you have to have, if you want to work from another location, the base requirement is that you have 20 megabits per second download and upload speed. Otherwise, they consider you on vacation. So they just have a baseline requirement. That's how important that it is. And the other thing that we need to do is pay attention to sound quality. So the barking dogs, I had a colleague who had a bird cage next to her workstation, like super cute at first until 10 minutes in, you're really done with the bird. But like coffee shop sounds, car noises. When Janeway says, hey, Janeway to bridge, you don't hear the engine room in the background. It's crystal clear communication. And it's surprisingly important, and also it's really easy to solve, right? We just need to get a good headset. Like a good noise canceling headset is about 50 euros. I don't know how much it is in kronas, but it's about 50 euros. It's not that much. And if you're working in an open office environment, this can really be a lifesaver. And there's an app for that. There's this new app called Crisp.ai that people are raving about. And what it does is it works with every system, every video conferencing system, and it takes the background noise out for you. There are lots of ways to actually make the background noise crystal clear. And then the last component of this is we've got to use good equipment. Like Skype for Business and these spider phones, I'm not saying throw it into a river or into a lake. We should recycle them and be responsible, of course, but we got to get rid of them because, companies are saying, hey, we want you to work with colleagues in Argentina and in India and in Vietnam, but we want you to use Skype for Business, and you might as well just use tin cans, right? So we got to just throw that equipment out and upgrade our conference rooms so that we can actually have crystal clear communication with our remote colleagues. This is the old style of conference room we all know and don't love, right? Where we've got Bob there in the middle. And this is sort of the new shiny versions of conference room. And the good news is it doesn't take that much to get really good equipment. What's important about this is, one, the remote participants are here and they're life size on the wall. They don't have to be, replica life size, but they're not these little boxes at the top, and we can hear them clearly. And also for the remote participants, there's the webcam at the top that auto focuses on the person who's speaking. So they're not just looking straight ahead and everybody on the right and left side is sort of out of view. In addition, they can also see the whiteboard or whatever slides or presentations are being shared. So instead of just being these annoying mosquitoes that are, when you're in these hybrid meetings, the remote participants are always like these mosquitoes that you just want to get rid of. They fly in and they say something every once in a while. This brings them into the room with us, and it's surprisingly important for our online meetings. Now, of course, there's all kinds of great tools for this. This is one of my favorites. It's called the Meeting Owl. It's great for those hybrid meetings. And what it is it's a 360-degree, or it's a microphone with a 360-degree microphone and camera that auto-focuses on the person speaking. So you get the overview of everyone in the room, and then whoever's speaking comes into the center. So these kind of tools are not very expensive, but they make a world of difference. And if we want to get a little bit fancier, this is a new one, new system called Nareva. This gets more into the collaboration space. And what this is a virtual whiteboard that is projected on the wall, and you can draw and anything you could do on a normal whiteboard. However, the remote participants can see and interact with this board in real time as well. So all of a sudden, you can have good collaborative brainstorming sessions with people in the room and remote at the same time. Now, in November, I'm going to be doing a workshop with Nareva, a Twin City workshop, we've called it. We're going to try it out. We have participants in Amsterdam and participants in Calgary, all working together on the virtual whiteboard in a workshop together. So we'll see how that goes. It's going to be an experiment, but I have high hopes. Okay, so that's making communicating easy, and I'll show some more tools in a bit. But next, I think what's really important is what's normal behavior for our teams? What kind of information do we need to share? How are we going to communicate with each other? And how do we know what each other are doing? All of these things are really implicit when we work with people in an office because, we can see each other, right? And in fact, I would say, we don't exactly know what everybody's doing. We can just see that they're at work. but unless you can see their screen, you don't actually know what people are doing. But when we're remote, it's out of sight, out of mind, right? So we need to really understand what is normal. And trust on any team is really important, and trust on a remote team is critical. And there's many different ways to define trust. It's kind of an abstract concept, but the way that I like to define it is it consists of, or the building blocks, in my opinion, are being reliable. Can I rely on you to get the work done? Doing high quality work consistently, and responsiveness. Can I find you if I need to? Because, we can just easily close the laptops, but when we can't get in touch with somebody and when they're not responding, we don't tend to make positive assumptions about where they are. It's usually like, oh, I'm sure they're just watching Netflix, or, they're off doing something. So we need to find ways of focusing on these three things. But when we have it, magic can happen. Now, there's many different ways to define normal behavior, and the way that I like to do it is I say we should create team agreements with each other. Like, are there core hours that we should be working together? What are our expected response times? What kind of tools are we going to use to talk to each other? Is it, some people are email people, some people are phone people, some people are WhatsApp people, and we really need to normalize what is the behavior on our team that we're expecting. I interviewed Beat Buhlmann from Evernote, and he says that they have all kinds of etiquettes for what they define all kinds of etiquettes for their team. So, for example, they have ways of behaving in meetings. For example, when there's two people talking at once, one who's in the room and one who's remote, the remote person gets preference because they have less context and it's harder for them to speak up during the meeting. So that's one of their meeting etiquettes that they've established. Or at the end of the meeting, they all wait for the remote people to hang up before they leave the room. So just certain etiquettes that we can work with each other that in an office, it's kind of easy, we just learn them, but online it's a little bit different. So they've gone further. They have etiquettes for their email, for their calendar, for what's required if you're going to work in a home office or in a co-working space, how they do their tasks, how they behave on Slack, and all of that stuff is pretty easy to define. So instead of giving you more examples, I'll just say I've got a whole bunch of templates on my websites for how to create team agreements. So if you don't have one on your team right now, you can just go to collaborationsuperpowers.com/extras and you can download some team agreements. There's instructions and templates there. Okay, so let's talk about presence. Presence, how do we show up for work in a virtual workforce? That's my favorite part. One is we need to find ways to see each other. That old spider phone, it was better than nothing, but we can do a lot better now. And one of the easiest ways, of course, is just by turning the webcam on. And I know a lot of people don't like turning their webcams on, but I would say it's the age of video. And when we have really good internet, this is one of the reasons why we need good internet, it's really important that we can see each other. So, some people say like, oh, I'm having a bad hair day, and I'll say, well, just get a bigger headset, and cover it up. Or if you want to, you want to work at home and be in your pajamas, well, you can just put on a normal shirt or a scarf or something and then just keep your pajama bottoms on. But it's time, when you go into an office, you show up in an office in person. When we work together online, we also need to be professional and work together and show up online. So I would say definitely turning your webcams on is a really important component of team building and camaraderie and having people engaged in our meetings. This, by the way, is Zoom. It's one of my favorite video conferencing tools. There's many others on the market, but this one is particularly great. And without even just beyond finding ways to see each other, I think we need to find more ways of being together online. Now, as developers, you all have, you've sort of mastered this field already, right? This is pair programming, as you can see here. And a lot of people, you sit at the computer, one person's programming and the other person is reviewing the code, and typically you're sitting at the computer together. But I've interviewed a lot of developers who really prefer doing it remotely because they're in their own workspace, they've got their own temperature, you've got your own stuff around you, your own monitors, whatever it is. And so, it's much more comfortable to actually do it remotely. Now, there's no reason that this should be limited to developers only, and other people can do it as well. So 7 years ago, I was hired to write a book together with a woman in California. And so there's a 9-hour time zone difference. I live in the Netherlands for the last 10 years. And so what we would do at 9 a.m. her time and at 6 p.m. my time, we would get online together. We'd turn the video on for the first 5-10 minutes just to have girl talk and like, how was your weekend and how was your date last night and what's going on? And then we'd turn the video off and continue writing in a Google Doc together and just having a work session. And so you can kind of think of it as like a virtual co-working session. Now, what's fun about the story is that Gretchen, her name is Gretchen, we enjoyed working together so much that after the book was done, we decided, well, we'll just continue working and doing our own projects. So even to this day, 7 years later, we're still working together one night a week, every Monday, and we get together and we do the same thing. We have the 5 minutes of chit-chat. She's still dating, and so we still ask about her date night. And then we turn it off, and then we just work on our own projects side by side. So I can hear her typing, and and she can hear me typing. And every once in a while, I'll say, "Hey, I'm really struggling with this blog post. Can you help me with the title or whatever it is?" And then we'll get together and we'll work like that together. So I've never met her in person yet, but she's still one of my closest friends, and we continue working together to this day. Now, there are other ways. This one is actually, it's a bad picture, but it highlights an interesting way of working, which is this is 2 teams in Germany, and there's one team sitting in a room here, and the other team is sitting in another room in another city in Germany here, and they're bound together just by a big monitor, and they have the video and sound on all day. So it simulates what it's like to actually work in the same room together as 2 separate teams. And on this side over here, they've got their virtual task board. I don't know if it's Jira or some kind of Kanban board, but they've got their virtual task board, so as they're completing tasks, they're just moving sticky notes and things to the right place. So that all, that works for them. They're using a tool called Ateo board. It stands for Ein Team, Ein Office. One team, one office. But you don't need any fancy equipment. You could just get a regular monitor. This is an office in Australia. It's a real estate company. They have hundreds of people in their Melbourne office and hundreds of people in their China office. So what they've done is they've set up these giant monitors in both offices, and they've got the sound and the video connection all day. And this is where teams get together. You can accidentally bump into somebody. They have their daily stand-ups around these monitors. And you can see here, this is sort of a chill-out space. They've got video games. They can play video games together. But this is how they keep both teams connected all the time. And if you look up close, this is sort of the window into their China office. And that day that I was visiting, they just happened to be at lunch that day. But they just have these monitors all over the place, and it works really well for them. Now, for some people, it seems a little bit like Big Brother, like, oh my God, you've got a camera into the office. But actually what it turns out is when you know the people on the other side, it feels a lot more normal and relational than you might expect. There was 2 teams in India that did this, and they just had these monitors in their offices with the video on but the sound off. And what they ended up happening is they developed a sign language between the offices. So they had a special wave for hello in the morning and a different way of saying I'm going to lunch and ending the day. So it actually enhanced the team building in weird ways that they didn't expect. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit far out into some weird spaces, but I want to show you what's coming on the market. This one's actually not so new anymore. This is a virtual office. It's called Sakoko. And what you're looking at is just what it sounds like. It's an office that you go to online. Each one of these individual boxes represents a different office, and each one of these icons is a person that's in the office. Now, you can only see and hear the people that are in the same office as you, but you can see where everybody else is on the virtual floor plan. So now you no longer have to say hey, can you meet next Tuesday at 2? I can go knock on the virtual door of the coffee drinkers and join them anytime I want because I know that they're there. So this is a great way for people to have visibility into where people are and what they're working on, and it really creates a sense of team for your virtual colleagues. This is not the only one on the market. There's another one out there. There's 20, but some of the bigger ones. This one's called Remo. You can see it's sort of a similar thing, but instead of the faceless avatars, they've actually chosen to put the face of the person there. So same concept. You just double-click to go to a different room. And then this one's a little bit more 3D. It's called Walkabout Workplace, and you can actually design your own office. You can have your own view, your own furniture in your office. So just another way of doing it. Okay, so we'll go a little bit into the weird. So this is called the Kubi. This one doesn't work. It's been through airport security way too many times. However, I like to show it because it highlights a concept. What it allows you to do is you can beam in just like on a video conferencing tool, but now you can move yourself with the arrow keys on your keyboard. So from left to right, or you can nod your head yes, or nod your head no. So what this allows you to do, it's a really perfect tool for if you're the only remote person in an all in-person team, you can now sit at the table with your colleagues and you can move yourself to see who's talking around the table. And you can nod your head. And it also opens up a whole new form of office humor, of course. There's like bow ties and wigs and all kinds of stuff. So, but what the important thing is for the people, for the remote person, it's great because now you can turn yourself to see what's going on. But for the people in the room, that small amount of movement has a really powerful effect because what it does is it humanizes the person. So no longer are you on a static laptop where people tend to stand in front of you. Now, all of a sudden, you're more like a person in the room because you have that movement. So it's really interesting how that small thing can go really a long way. Now, the guy that you're seeing on the screen here, he's got his Kubi in his office, and he's working from another location. So you can now be in two places at once, and which is awesome. But so people, who are working with him at the office, they can just come into his office, and he's there, except for he's not there. So it's totally cool. Totally cool. Oh, I should show. So I don't know if you guys have seen Demolition Man. This movie came out in, oops. I missed the punchline. Okay, darn. All right, that's why. Oh, here we go. So in 1993, this movie came out, and somebody sent me the video clip after they saw me show the Kubi. And you can see, it was way clunkier back in 1993. It's really we've got the sleek iPads now. But the concept was there 30 years ago in terms of making this happen. So I thought that was interesting. And then the punchline is, Jeff here, who worked for the company that creates the Kubis, he was experimenting, and he was the only in-person human in a meeting full of robots and Kubis. So that was an interesting experiment. I actually participated in a panel discussion in Las Vegas where we all beamed in to Vegas on Kubis and actually had a panel discussion on stage, like zzz, zzz, zzz. Totally interesting experience. Okay, but most people know the telepresence technology. If you've seen it on The Big Bang Theory, this is the drivable robot. And usually they're person height, and you beam in just like you would on Skype, and then you can drive these things using the arrow keys of your keyboard. It's really simple interface. Now, at the Suitable Technologies office, 50% of their workforce beams in via robot, and 50% are there in the flesh. And it's really cool because there's all kinds of new etiquettes that open up when we have this technology. Like you can't shake hands, right, with somebody in a robot. So instead, you fist bump, because that's much more 2D technology. And somehow it's more team spirit also, yo. So that's cool. So I want to show a short clip of just what this robot looks like when you have it in your office. And the sound in the beginning is a little bit, it's a little bit off, but I think you'll get the concept. So, oops.
Computing Editor with Technology Review.
Gets better.
This telepresence robot from Ego Communications is one of a handful hoping to find favour with office workers looking for an alternative to travel. And it certainly beats phone or video calls. While sat at my desk in San Francisco, I can roam corridors in Cambridge, Massachusetts, seeking out people in their offices, attending meetings, and joining in with gossip in the kitchen. But replacing a person with a machine is not always straightforward. In our January issue, I take a look at the social side of becoming and working with a robot.
Controlling one of these telepresence robots is like using a video chat program with a few extra controls to steer yourself around. You can do most of the things that you would do in person. For example, stopping to talk with people you meet.
The Dominican Republic was great, Tom. They're trying to get a 2-year-old baby down to the Dominican Republic was difficult.
Alright. Well, I'm sure he liked it when you got there.
Yeah.
Or having a conversation as you walk down a corridor alongside someone. Because you can get a feel for the space around you and watch people's body language, those conversations are much like those you would have face to face. I got much more out of our morning meeting as a robot than I would dialing in on the phone as usual.
So you get the idea. Now, this robot I don't like so much because it's kind of belly button height, which I find like really odd. So I would say if you're going to experiment with it, make sure you get one that is actually person height, where you can actually look at the face of somebody. And it seems really weird and creepy at first, and until you know the person in the robot, and then it's actually not that weird and creepy anymore. You get used to it over time. So, okay. So we're going to go one step further into the weird and talk about virtual reality, because virtual reality is going to become a reality very soon. There's lots of experiments happening with it. And a lot of people don't use it because it's really hard. If you've ever tried Second Life, it's like learning how to play the piano. You know, it's like you've got these weird limbs and you have to figure out how to get all over go places. And I kept bumping into people, stepping on toes, literally. And this is Roomy. It's virtual reality for remote teams. And you put on your headset and you walk into your virtual office and you go down your virtual hallway into your virtual conference room and you stand around your virtual whiteboard with your virtual colleagues for your stand-up meetings or whatever this is. And this just gives you sort of a more spatial way of being with your colleagues during the day. So it is definitely not there yet. I mean, most of us are still, we've got a lot of spider phones in this room and a lot of Skype for Business, so we're not there yet. But we are headed in this direction. And virtual reality is starting to incorporate touch and all kinds of things, so it's becoming really real. And I think, actually, with the whole climate change thing happening, we're going to need to find ways of being together without traveling. And I think virtual reality could become one of those ways. But it's still not seeing a lot of people really using it in reality. Okay, and if you thought I couldn't get one step weirder, I can. And also, I'm also a Star Wars fan, so I didn't want to leave out the Star Wars people with my Star Trek fan. But holograms are just around the corner, and in fact, they've been around for a long time. So what I want to show you is I want to show you two clips. One clip is from 2012 at a Coachella concert. And it's with two rappers, Snoop Dogg, who is there in the flesh. I'm also a huge Snoop Dogg fan, which is why I'm showing it. And then Tupac, who is there as a hologram. And Tupac died years ago before Coachella, but they brought him back as a hologram for this concert. And I want to show you a clip. So one thing I should mention is that I apologize in advance for the language. It is gangster rap, so you're going to hear some language. But what I'd like you to focus on is how incredibly real the hologram technology looks. And if I hadn't have told you that Tupac was there as a hologram, you wouldn't actually know that it's him. So, I won't show the whole clip, of course, because it would be here forever. This is Snoop Dogg here. So pretty incredible. Like, I'd go to that concert for sure. So, and then the next one I'd like to show you is actually the Microsoft HoloLens technology. I am not a Microsoft hater, by the way. I'm just a Skype for Business hater. But Microsoft as a company, I'm totally okay with. Great products, all kinds of good things. And their HoloLens technology is incredible. So I want to show you a clip. I'm gonna skip to the middle just to show you the cool stuff, and then I'll skip a little bit to the end so you can get to the punchline. Let's see. And this was this year.
first, let me introduce you to Mini-Me. There she is, my perfect holograph. And thanks to the power of HoloLens 2, she just floats right with me. I'm literally holding my hologram, so natural. Now she's a little small to do a keynote. So let's get her up so she can do full-size Japanese keynote. Render keynote.
ホログラムになることには本当に驚くべきことがあります。私たちは最新の複合現実キャプチャ技術を使用し、私のホログラムを作成しています。実在の人物をホログラムとして見たことがあるかもしれませんが、私が実際に日本語を話しているのが
So pretty incredible. First, the hologram, and then that it's also in Japanese, and then I'll skip ahead to here.
Now, as you can see, this is mind-blowing technology. And what you just saw was my life-size hologram, my exact replica, rendered here in real time, speaking Japanese with my unique voice signature. To do this, we use mixed reality technology to create my hologram and render it here live. Then we use Azure's speech-to-text capability and English transcription to get my speech, then use Azure Translate to get the speech into Japanese, and finally applied neural text-to-speech technology so it sounded exactly like me, just speaking Japanese. And the most amazing part? All of these technologies exist today. The future is here.
So I think that's it's pretty incredible to show what we can do. So when I say we've got to get rid of the old technology, I'm not saying, okay, we'll run out and buy holograms and robots, but we can do a lot better than what we're doing now. And working with remote colleagues doesn't have to be torture. It can actually be really fun, but we have to sort of invest in what is going to work for our team. What do we need on our team? So I've talked a lot about tools. If you want to see, I've got a list of like 400 or 500 tools on my website, all broken into a category. So if you want to check out all the tools that are there, go ahead. But I will say, it's not about the tool necessarily. It's about the behaviors that we have around the tool. And even creating presence on a team with something as simple as pictures on walls in different offices can still go a long way. So this was a team that actually they had people in different locations, and they just put up the pictures of all the people in different locations, and then they changed those pictures based on the holiday or any significant events because it gets people coming back to the wall. So in the Netherlands, there's like everybody's named Jan, so you can know then, which Jan are you speaking to when you're working with them. So even something as simple as that can go a long way. Okay. So we've figured out how to make communicating easy. We've defined normal behavior. We've talked a little bit about the new forms of presence in the virtual workspace. And now I want to show a little bit about how we can easily incorporate fun on our teams. One of my favorite ways is by using icebreakers. And icebreaker questions, of course, are just really quick questions that we have in the beginning of meetings. And the important thing about it is science shows that once somebody has spoken once in a meeting, they're more likely to speak again. That is the real purpose of an icebreaker. And a lot of these are kind of silly icebreakers, like what's the last movie you cried during, or do you have any pets, what's your favorite smell? But in a more serious setting, you can also do an icebreaker like, what do you think the objective of this meeting is? Or what do you contribute, what expertise are you contributing to this meeting? So it doesn't always have to be silly necessarily. But what icebreakers also do besides getting people talking is we start to get to know each other a little bit better. And it's not just Bob from engineering anymore. It's Bob from engineering who is a baseball coach on the weekends, and he likes to go canoeing, and his favorite color is green, and he goes to vacation in Hawaii. You start to get over time, you get a really well-rounded picture of somebody just through simple questions like this. The other way that people are doing this, of course, is through our group instant messaging systems, Slack or Microsoft Teams or Yammer, whatever people are using. Everybody's got some sort of a fun channel where you can post fun pictures. This one was on the Management 3.0 team. Hanu posted a picture of his favorite trips to Italy and encouraged other people to do it. Nadine then posted her picture of Nicaragua. I posted a picture of my sister and my new nephew. So it was just a way of sharing something fun information with each other. It's our virtual water cooler, shall we say. And then there's really simple things that we can do, like virtual fikas or virtual lunches. This is Gretchen, the woman I was speaking about. This is Gretchen and Laura. They worked together, and their thing was every Wednesday they got together at noon for 30 minutes, and they just had lunch together. And their only rule was you're not allowed to talk about work. It's just lunch. It's just hanging out. And there's no reason that we can't do this with our teams too. The Management 3.0 team did this, and we just had whoever was around and wanted to would show up, and we just have lunch together with whoever's there. And then there's other things like quiz nights. Lots of teams are getting together on Fridays and just having a really quick quiz night. And if you want to get really crazy and a high level of trust on your team, you can have virtual dance parties. So this was, I can't remember who was DJing here, so probably Jürgen was DJing, and the rest of us got up and boogied. And as you can see, some people boogied harder than others, so, me included. I closed the curtains so my neighbors weren't like, what the heck is she doing in there? So this seems really silly, but what I want to show is there's a lot that we can do within the 4 virtual walls that we have, and I think it's really fun to experiment that. So the basics of that, though, is put time into team building, especially with remote teams, because if you leave team building to chance, chances are it won't happen. So we really have to be deliberate about doing it, because unless you're in a virtual office, you're never going to accidentally bump into somebody online. So with the new technologies, you might, but I think with what we're working with, we won't. So I know that many of you have to work with distributed teams. It's sort of the nature of the beast. And like I've shown you, there are many right ways to do it. And the payoff is awesome when we get it right, because we, as people, get a lot of freedom, right? We can work for companies where we're allowed to travel 3 months of the year. Or I have a colleague who likes to train for a triathlon, and being remote gives them the freedom to do that. Another colleague of mine is a war journalist in South Sudan while doing marketing for an online company. I mean, the possibilities for individuals are pretty amazing when we can get this right. And for companies, we get a stronger and more connected workforce. There's this concept called remote first, which is whether or not you allow for flexibilities in your company, just having the processes in place to be able to work flexibly if something were to happen strengthens our companies and makes us less vulnerable to weather and transportation strikes and all kinds of things that happen. And in the spirit, I know the theme in the conference is like experiments and stories of experiments. So this is one of my favorite graphs from the Management 3.0 community, which is when we're experimenting, we're succeeding 50% of the time and we're failing 50% of the time, but we're maximizing our learning. As we've heard that from all the talks today, and that's really the theme. We have to experiment with what works, because what works for one team is not going to work for the other team. So I really like this graph. And there's like best practices, things that we know that are going to work, so we just keep doing those, which is great because they work, but there's minimal learning in those areas. So that's sort of the theme. So I would say, experiment with how are you going to make your communicating easy, how do you define normal, how will you create presence, and how will you have fun on your teams. And I'll just end with saying, if you want to hear all the podcasts are available for free on the website, and if you want the book, it's available on Amazon. So I really appreciate the time and the invitation for being here. I know it's a hard talk to follow after lunch. I see sleepy eyes, but hopefully the Tupac got you a little bit jamming. And thank you. I really appreciate being here.